Okay then, hello and welcome to this episode of the Hollywood Podcast, where we have a legend, actually a Hall of Famer on our show today. Hello, welcome to everybody out there. We are on it's October, I can't believe it's October already. And we have another fabulous guest this week, Cynthia Rothrock, legend, 5-time forms and weapons champion, I believe that is. Cynthia, is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Yep. See, I know a little bit about you. How are you?
Well, I'm doing well as can be expected, I guess, in these crazy times.
Yeah. I know. So you were talking before about a lot of your works in Europe and all of that's been shut down now. And it's changed things a little bit, right?
Oh, yeah, drastically. Yes.
So tell me, you did what form did you do? Was it Taekwondo or was it karate more in the forms that you did? What was the basis of the styles that you worked on?
Well, I studied many styles, but my first style that I got my first black belt in was Tang Soo Do, which is Korean. Yeah, Korean. And then I went into Pai Lum Kung Fu, and then I went into Wushu. Then I did Eagle Claw, and then I studied a little bit of Kempo.
Did you find any similarities between them?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I was glad that I started in Tang Soo Do because it gave me a really strong kicking base. And when I started studying the Chinese styles, the kicks were a little bit different, but I preferred, kicking the way that I was taught in Tang Soo Do. So I would just use the Tang Soo Do style of kicking. And I think, once you're a black belt in a martial arts style, coordination, you understand movement. So you find the similarities in some of the blocking, some of the self-defense techniques. The Chinese styles have a little bit more circular movement, where the Tang Soo Do is more straight line, hard line techniques.
Yeah, I was going to say that. There was the difference between it was the Chinese have that circular it's not roundhouse, circular movement, even in preparation to get into a kick or a movement. So it's all different. So I'm always kind of curious, because did you find that when you took all those different things that you decided to stay on one thing, or you took little pieces from each that actually kind of developed you as a martial artist?
I think, when I teach like the techniques that I like, I kind of mix it up a bit. When I was competing, I started off doing Tang Soo Do forms. And then the main reason I switched to Chinese styles is because I really liked weapons, and my Tang Soo Do style didn't really have any weapons. So that was a big difference in the two styles. But, I just teach different things, the things that I like and I think are effective, because no matter what style that you do, there's some things that are traditional and you go, I wouldn't be doing that on the street for self-defense, so you're studying that because you're studying the art form. So I kind of take a mixture of everything I've learned, and I think every style is great. You just have to adapt to what works for you and what doesn't.
Do you think it actually depends on the type of style you have that works better in the movies? Because obviously you talked about something which was reality against, what you would use and what you would use. And I'm constantly talking about that when I do my sword experience about, this is not necessarily reality. You're dealing with targeting right now. If you really want to work on that, the reality of what you would do here would shorten very quickly. It was an entirely different process.
Right. Well, when you're doing film and you're fighting, you're doing all techniques that theoretically would work on the street. Would you use them? Would you do like jump spinning kicks? No, probably not. You'd probably do something more effective, like kick into the knee, kick into the groin. But I think most of the moves I do, I could make them work effectively. But when you're doing choreography or you're doing film fighting, the idea is to make every move look real with power. Sometimes I hate watching action movies because if it doesn't work and it looks silly, or there's misses or there's no power, I can't watch it. I'd rather go, let me shut that off and put a comedy in.
No, I'm with you. I mean, there's a lot of different fights I've seen, and I go, okay, that one's a really good one, because there's a lot that goes into a movie fight. It's not just about the kicks; it's about how the actors are working off of each other, or the stunt performers off of each other prior to the kick, because that kind of sells the kick itself or the punch or the throw or whatever the action is, because if you're really engaged in what that conversation is between the two, then you're much more engaged in it. And I agree with you. If that power's not in it, it kind of kills all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always said, I've worked on so many films, and sometimes I've had the experience, to work with people that really knew what they were doing, and sometimes they didn't. So my dog is trying to steal the conversation.
So still the limelight.
Yeah, someone's outside. But anyway, it doesn't matter if you could be the most excellent, phenomenal martial artist, but if you're fighting someone and they don't know how to react or they don't know how to sell it for you, you're not going to look good. So, I think when we're doing our action, we really depend on people that can react and make you look good. So you could do the simplest technique and it could look so powerful just by someone's reaction.
Yeah, it's. I've been hit several times during my career on the screen, and when you do get hit, it doesn't sell as well because either the reaction is not happening, or you haven't crossed the lens, and it's such a simple thing that you wouldn't think about. I mean, I've looked at dailies where I got smacked in the face, and I thought, oh, that would look good. And it kind of, it's hardly anything unless you get that reaction back again. You're absolutely right. This doesn't work.
Right.
So, when did you start in the movies? How did your transition from martial arts to movie making happen?
Well, when I was competing, my goal was to be undefeated for 5 years. And this is like not just competing 5 times. I've competed over 100 times in those 5 years. And I just thought nobody would ever beat that record. So during my 5th year, I went on an audition. Yun Kuei was in LA and he was auditioning. They were looking for a guy to be the next Bruce Lee. I was on the West Coast demonstration team with Ernie Reyes, and they called him and they said, bring your guys down because they're looking for someone to be the next Bruce Lee. And he said, what about the girls? And they said, oh yeah, bring the girls, but they're really looking for a guy. So I went down and Yun Kuei says, I did some self-defense, I did form, I did weapons, and I had a free spar. And Yun Kuei says, I want the girl. So he signed me up. So off I was to Hong Kong. This was in the mid 80s. And I was still competing because if I didn't finish my competition, I wouldn't have got my goal for 5 years in a row. So I went over there and I would be on set, and then I would fly to Minneapolis, compete, come back, be on set, fly to Oklahoma City. So I finally, when I had enough points, they said, you're so far ahead of anybody, don't worry, you're number one, for the year. Then I was like, yes. And then I went into finishing Yes, Madam, which was my first movie. And I really didn't think I was going to be a film star. I thought, oh my God, I'm in a movie. How crazy is that? I'll do one movie. And I remember in my head, it was like, I might be on a poster and someday I'll show my children and say, look, your mom was in a movie. So I really never knew what was going to become of it. And after we did Yes, Madam, it was such a huge success in Hong Kong that right away Golden Harvest was asking me to sign a contract. And I was like, oh my God, well, I just finished my competition and now I'm going to go into movie career. So I was really blessed. It just kind of blended right in. It's almost kind of like you were destined to do this. I really was, because it was just fell right in place at the right time.
Did you find a difference? Because obviously you've done, Hong Kong movies are fast. I mean, they're done fast. They're the way that they choreograph and the way that they set things up. And I've talked to a lot of people, is very different, or was, at least, especially at that time, because in the West, we really didn't have as much of that type of action. Did you find that, I mean, obviously at that point you had only one thing to reference it, but once you went on to an American movie, did you see the vast difference between the two?
Absolutely. I mean, when I did my first movie, Yes, Madam, it was 7.5 months long to shoot. And the ending fight scene took 1 month, right? So I'm used to, it was very fast. You would never have rehearsal. You would come in the day you're going to shoot, and then they would show you like movements of about maybe 40 movements to do. And then they would shoot that, and they would shoot it probably about 30 times. So you had to pick up these movements really fast. So it was really hard, I thought, to be an actor in Hong Kong, because you had to have a really good memory. And as you know, it's not just fighting. You have to be in a certain spot for your camera, for your angles. There's a whole lot, going on doing films. When I did my first American movie, I'd actually say I did China O'Brien, but that was still Golden Harvest. So we still had a little bit of the Hong Kong influence, but I think I did martial law, and it was it was like a piece of cake for me. It was like we shot the whole movie like in 4 weeks. You know, we shot the fight scenes in like 20 minutes, and I think it was so it was easier because the action was easier. Because in Hong Kong it took so long because they would set up these outrageous stunts, you know, and then that would take all day. And I guess the glory of it was in Hong Kong, you had a lot of time. So when I was doing the American movies, it was like budget wise, no, we got to shoot it. We got to get it fast. And, you know, one take and that's great. Good. Move on. And you're like, well, wait, I can do it better. No, that was great. Move on.
So did you find, I mean, it's funny because I actually thought they would shoot movies quicker in Hong Kong than they would in the West. They'd be slower in the West to do things because they weren't as experienced in doing, you know, wire work and, you know, a lot of action stuff. So it's actually you found it was the other way around, did you?
Well, yeah, because you got to remember, when I came to America, I was doing a low budget picture. So there was really, there were stunts. You know, it was actually funny because back in that day, that's when they used to flip the cars by themselves. You know, there was no CGI. The stunt guy would get in, ramp it up, flip the cars, come around. But as far as like martial arts, I think in a US movie, I never had any wire work. You know, I never had a stunt that I could get killed on, which I had so many times in Hong Kong. So to me, it was like, ooh, a little vacation. And I know when we were shooting in Hong Kong, the thing was, Yun Kuei, he'd always go, Cindy, hit harder, harder, harder. He always wanted me to hit hard. And my transition to American movies, the stuntmen were going, you don't need to hit me so hard, you know, and you don't even have to touch, just make it look like it worked. And I was so trained, you know, from doing, I think I did like 7 films in Hong Kong, you know, of just hitting really hard and taking it hard. So that was a little bit of used to, you know, getting used to that. So I was like, I could do an American movie without any pads on. In Hong Kong, I couldn't do that.
Did you find that that there were more accidents or more injuries that happened in Hong Kong?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think on every film I got hurt, could have gotten hurt seriously. You know, the stunts I was doing, you would have a professional stunt person here in America do it. They wouldn't even let you do it. I remember there was a fight scene I was supposed to do in the back of a truck or drive the truck. And I'm like, yeah, I could do it. And they're like, no, we're going to get a stunt person to do that. You know, so they were more cautious over there. And I think in Hong Kong, you know, the more dangerous stunt you do, they don't really think, what if you get killed? What if you get hurt? Because if you do get hurt, then it's like, all right, well, we'll just wait. And I think that's one of the reasons that filming was long, because an actor would get hurt. Oh, okay, we got to wait 3 weeks for them to recover or to heal.
God help if they tried to do in 3 weeks here. It'd be like, oh, no, we're losing money. You know.
Absolutely. So that was like, you know, it was like a whole different world for me.
So
and plus I had a script when I was in Hong Kong. We never had a script. I never knew what I was shooting until that day. And they would, because in Hong Kong, they didn't film with sound, right? It was no sound. And then they dubbed it. And then they always had someone else come in and do your voice. And I remember saying to one of the actors, well, why don't you do your own voice for the dubbing? You know, because I always had an English accent. And they're like, oh, well, because I'm just an actor. Someone has a better voice than I do. It was
really? So they didn't. So really, it was dubbed. Not only so there was no sound. It was just basically shot, and then obviously sound effects on hits and fights were actually put in afterwards, as well as the actors' voices.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, everything.
Wow, I didn't know that actually. So you're acting or being as an actress, and then coming into America, having to do sound. How was that transition?
Well, it was actually good because I knew what I was shooting. Like in Hong Kong, I remember I was shooting this movie, Magic Crystal, and the director said to me, look at the ceiling. And I said, well, what am I looking at? He said, it doesn't matter. Just look at the ceiling. So I'm looking up at the ceiling, and there's little holes in the ceiling, and I'm counting the holes in my head. When I go to see the movie for the premiere, I realized we were getting invaded by aliens, and that's what I was looking at. And I was like, don't you think that would have been an important thing to tell me?
They might not have known at that time that they were actually doing that. You know?
Yeah, right. So the greatest part for me is I knew what the other actor was saying. I could react from them, and it was interesting because it was so much easier. You know, it was easier for me, you know, to study the script, to know what I was doing, you know, to get the interaction from the other person. You know, so it was quite an experience for me. It's like, ooh, wow.
So I mean, obviously, I worked in Russia. Actually, we met in Russia well, 10 years ago. Was it 10?
Yeah.
I can't remember how long it was. And I
Yeah.
did a movie 2 years ago with Alexander Nevsky. He was the executive producer. He wasn't acting at this time. But they were speaking Russian, and I had to speak Russian in it. And I had to learn the Russian in, I think, 3 days, 4 days, and massive chunks of dialogue. And I'm trying to get the sound. But the problem I found at first was the fact that when somebody would say something and I would reply, I wasn't sure where the end of the sentence would be, what they would do, because I didn't speak their Russian. Did you? So it's kind of like, okay, I think this is what the end of the conversation is, but let's try and do it. So